There we go. Yes, people, welcome back to Process. We are joined by another very special guest today, natural bodybuilder, online coach who is currently in prep mode at the minute, so his time is very valuable, so we appreciate him coming on. Steve Hall, welcome to the podcast.
It's all good. You're distracting me from food, from my feet hurting, because there's like, I don't know, you lose body fat everywhere. This is my thought. I've lost like body fat on the bottom of my feet. That's why it hurts standing now a little bit. And yeah, you're a welcome distraction. And that's why I'm looking like I have like, I don't know, I've been away on holiday or something because I recently competed. So I've got the kind of post-show glow going on.
It's always a good thing, probably making the most of that time when you're that lean and stuff, getting photos and stuff like that, because you're always looking quite good. Your face is always, that's the one thing that I always notice myself is when I get lean, is always the face that comes in. And then when I start to gain weight, it all goes straight back to the face, which I think most lads probably find the same sort of thing. So obviously talking about competing, we talked about just before the podcast, how was your last competition? Because you had a competition on Sunday, you placed 4th. Obviously we'll touch on it later, but how was that for you? How was the whole show, and how was the kind of result in terms for yourself?
So if I kind of draw it back, because I think this relates to my experience, if I draw it back, like my first competitive season, 2014, I competed with this federation, the UKDFBA. And at the time, they didn't actually have qualifiers. They just had, I didn't realize this, it was completely new to everything, but they just had like a finals. So they just had one show. It was an international UK finals. And I went and did the novice show there. And I placed 4th out of that novice show. And then I competed 2017 and I made it through a qualifier. They had qualifiers now. And I came 3rd at my qualifier. And so I decided, well, screw it, I'm going to go to finals anyway, even though thinking about it, if you come 3rd in a qualifier and you're already like at your peak leanness, do you have much more to give? But anyway, I decided to go, and I'm really glad I did, because I came 5th at the kind of international finals. And now 2021, and I came 4th in the UK international finals after qualifying and winning my qualifier. So that felt amazing to win the qualifier. 4th place was a little bit bittersweet, an improvement obviously upon previous times, but I felt like maybe my physique could have got more than that, but it's all out of your hands. This is what we're talking about. When you get on a bodybuilding stage, you have to realize it's subjective. The judges have their own opinions on what they're looking for, and you can't control who else is turning up on stage. It's like, you've done everything, you've done your process, you're either proud of that or you're not. You're either proud of the physique and the improvements you've made on previous kind of seasons in terms of how you look, or you're not. It's you versus you, and this is definitely what I promote. But I definitely had I want at least top 5. If I didn't get a top 5, I would have been pretty kind of, I would have been very disappointed without a top 5, considering how I'd done previously and how much I'd improved. And then I really wanted a top 3. And so to come 4th was like, okay, kind of a bit bittersweet. But like I said, like, you can't control what turns up in the day. And when I reflect upon my even just stage weight, my stage weight was basically 10 pounds up on 2017. So that's a good chunk of muscle mass, and it's very evident in my physique as well. And I consider, if I had turned up with my 2017 physique this year, I wouldn't have been in that top 5, not a chance. I would have been one of the guys in the back, kind of with nothing kind of to show for it. In some ways, you have photos, you have the experience, which are more important than the placing itself, because I mean, it's for people like 6 months normally, to just say on average that you're in prep for, and you have less than 30 minutes on stage. So if you're not enjoying, or you're not getting anything out of that entire process, and you're just doing it for that 30 minutes of that trophy, you're going to be bitterly disappointed. And I think that's why possibly a lot of bodybuilders don't stick around in a sport for that long, because they kind of maybe focus too much on the kind of the outcome and that goal versus the process and what they can kind of take away from that. So in a long way of answering that, I'm very proud of the physique. I'm very proud of what I brought to stage and my process. I'm disappointed with the result and gutted about that, but I have another show in like a week and a half now, and let's see what I can do there, see if I can get a top 3, and we move forward and just look to always improve.
Yeah, spot on. I was going to say bodybuilding, if you're getting into it for them reasons, like you said, for the reward, it's not really worth it. It's all about doing it for yourself. If you're looking back at your 2017 physique and you're improving 10 pounds of muscle for a natural athlete, for anybody, especially when you're already at a decent level, it's a lot. It's a good amount of muscle gain. So like just take the improvements from yourself. And like I said, if you're doing it for other things, and you mentioned the word process by podcast, the process, that's one of the big things. That's one of the reasons that I fell in love with not just bodybuilding, but training and that, because the process of it is what kind of helps you along the way of life. There's so many things you can take from the process of training, of getting your nutrition on point. And also I always find when I'm dieting, I'm a lot more productive. I kind of use it because everything's so regimented and I'm tracking food, I'm tracking steps, I'm tracking my sleep, all this sort of stuff. I'm a trainer, obviously. Then everything else seems to kind of fall in place nicely in my life because I'm kind of all focused on everything. So there's a lot that you can take from not just obviously bodybuilding, that's the extreme, but even just training in general. So it is all about the process. And if you end up loving that, then the rewards will probably end up coming kind of as a second part of it. But we'll touch up about a bit like your story. I like going back and diving into where the whole kind of journey begins for you. So in terms of training, in terms of fitness, obviously I know you got a story to tell about your accident you had. When did training start for you, not just in terms of bodybuilding, but fitness in general?
So yeah, it's a tricky one. Not a tricky one. I've always been into sports. Like I just love being active. I was an active child. I wasn't like, I think you tend to get the extremes of you're either super skinny and you got into it, or you're like overweight and that's what got you into it. And I was definitely on the more skinny side. Like you could see my rib cage. I'm like, I have quite a big like bone structure, but like I had nothing on it really. I was like skin and bones. I loved sports and I was pretty decent at them, not like amazing. I wasn't like your classic jock, like top of the class, but I was in the mix. I was all right. And so I played like various sports. I know you said you played football at a high level and professional for a while. I was actually scouted back when I was younger for Charlton Athletic when they were in the Premier League. And so I was playing at like a high level for that time, but I couldn't continue that because it was like a crazy commute from where I was into London, and with school and commitments, it didn't work out. So anyway, I've always been into these things. Like I love all of that. I didn't actually get into the gym until I saw, I think it was like two of my mates basically, when I was almost 16 and they were like coming back from the gym. I was like, what are you doing? And they're like, oh, we're kind of training with weights. I was like, I want to do that. And I basically got hooked from doing it at that time. My split at that time was like, I had a kind of free weight day and then a cable day and then chuck some like treadmill sprints every now and then. So I had no clue what I was doing. I remember like sipping Boots bought protein shakes. Boots Pharmacy bought protein shakes in like the toilets to try and hide it from people thinking I was doing something like cheating or something. And yeah, it was, I was clueless at the start. So I did regularly weight train though from about the age of 16 and I'm 31 now. So it's been a while in the game, to be fair. But I didn't take it super seriously and I was doing lots of other things. And I went to university and I tried like rowing club. I played football whilst I was there, did running club whilst still doing my weight training. And in the mix of all of that, in my second year, and this comes to where I kind of really fell in love with bodybuilding, was I was on one of these kind of 10-kilometer runs that I would do around campus. And I had my Garmin watch on, had my like Garmin like heart rate monitor. And so I took my running seriously at the time. And I could see on the Garmins, they would have this like a shadow of your previous best time. So it knew where you were on like the race. So you kind of race against yourself and like beating yourself. And this just tells you what I'm like every single time I do this run, I had to beat my previous self every time. So I was on to beat that. And so I came to some kind of traffic lights really close to the end, literally probably like less than a minute from my flat. And I went for it. It was flashing amber and I looked right and there's a van and it hits me. So I ended up smashing their windscreen, but I came off definitely worse. So I have some scarring on my elbow and on my lower back. I had, what's it called? I've got prep brain, so I forget words. I fractured my skull. That's what the word is, or fracture. And I was taken into hospital and released quite quickly, actually, after like a couple of days. But I went home and I can just remember feeling completely out of sorts, like just wanting to be on my own. And then I kind of had like somewhat of a bit of a panic attack. In the evening, I was like puking up a lot and just was in a really bad way, and then got taken back into hospital, for which I stayed for almost a month because they found I had low sodium levels. So I'd bruised, they think, my pituitary gland, which just controls a lot of hormones within the body, including kind of electrolyte balance. And if you have very low sodium, you can seizure and you can die. Like, it's as simple as that. If you mess around enough, like it's like a water toxification. You drink enough water, you can get low sodium. People have died from that because they're playing stupid games and things. So I wasn't allowed to be released until my body was somewhat able to normalize like safe levels. And then I was on fluid restrictions and some medication. I can remember my fluid was like 250 mils a day. So I would have a little bottle of innocent juice, but it was water. I just filled it up every day. And this was like, that's all I could have. And I can even remember having I ate some watermelon and it really screwed me over because I didn't even think about the fluid that was in that. And I felt really bad for like a day. It was a horrible time, really depressed. I know you said you like talking about mental health, and this was one of the hardest times of my life. I wasn't enjoying life at all. I didn't want to be doing anything. I didn't want to be there. Like I can remember saying I had thoughts of not wanting to be on the earth, and I didn't care about living a life, and it wasn't fun at all. But I continued, persisted, moved forward. And during this period of time, I started recovering from it eventually, like getting better and better. The body was kind of recovering itself. I guess the bruising, they think, died down on the pituitary gland or what have you. And I started getting back into kind of weight training. I still was trying to do it. I do remember going back into the gym for the first time, and I couldn't even like bench the bar. Like I didn't have the coordination and things like this. It just it all gone. So I was basically, I say I started when I was 16, but at this point I was 20 again. So I'd basically come back to ground zero and lost any small amounts of muscle mass that I'd grown during that period of time. And I started learning more. So I started kind of finding fitness forums, finding out about bulking, and started just pounding away tons of food. So I remember gaining out of hospital a ridiculous amount of food. Like, people saw me and they're like, what the hell's happened to you? Because I came out like a skinny, really chiseled face, like really slim. And within a year, I was up to the heaviest I've ever been in my life. And I was like disappointed if I didn't gain like 7 pounds in a week. Like, I was looking to gain weight, like aggressively. I was like, if I eat clean food, I'll gain clean weight. That was like my mindset. So I just pounded the food, pounded the weights, still was doing a little bit of running here or there because I was like, oh, cardio burns the fat, this was what I was thinking. And I wasn't particularly happy at this point. I was like, I've just kind of got fat. Like, I gained back the muscle I lost and more probably, but I was not in great shape. So then I started cutting down and learning even more. I found bodyrecomposition.com, which was Lyle McDonald's website. I just digested everything on his website, read article after article and back to front, and just was obsessed, and started finding people like Matt Ogus on YouTube. He directed me to like Eric Helms and 3DMJ, and I was just obsessed now with like this natural bodybuilding and flexible dieting. I was like, man, I don't have to eat like a complete and utter bro, and calorie balance, I shouldn't be eating quite that much. I just learned so much. But you can think I did the extreme kind of fat bulk folk, if you will. And then I did the complete keto diet with like refeeds of tons of carbs on the weekend. And I just had no understanding of what I was doing, but slowly I was educating myself. And by the time 2014 came around, and in this time I decided to continue my studies. I delayed some of my exams, but I still did them. And I graduated and I got an office job for which I was commuting to like every day, and still getting my training in, still doing everything. And eventually got to a point where I was like, I want to take this to stage. So I, at that time, was also like, I love this. I want to become a personal trainer. So I educate myself through, I think it was like the YMCA, did their courses on the weekends when I wasn't at work, and became a one-on-one PT, and kind of worked within a gym and on the gym floor for probably about almost a year. And in that time also competed in 2014. And it was kind of a test to myself. The reason I really wanted to compete was like, can I get to stage and recover and become healthy? And like, if I can do that, then I can do anything with my body. Like I've like done the ultimate test. It was almost like that. It's like to prove to myself that I was well and truly recovered from the accident. And I did manage it. And I was like, man, I love this. And if I can do this in like the worst position possible, in a like basically at ground zero, and build myself back up to the best physique I've ever had in my life, like I can help other people do this because I've been through it all and I've educated myself and I understand it. And that's why I really went down the personal training route. That's where the name Revive Stronger comes from, because I revived stronger. And ever since, I've just been obsessed about educating myself more, helping other people, and spreading the word of evidence-based fitness, because there's a lot of shit out there. And there's some really smart, educated people doing amazing work. And I'm so grateful I get to speak to them on the podcast, share their message, and try and also dumb down some of the science and share that with my audience, because I think a lot of people get frustrated and they go down routes and paths that they don't need to, that are unhealthy or unnecessary. And it can be done in a really healthy way. And you can develop a physique that you ultimately never thought you could get to. I didn't think I'd ever get to the point I am now, but after that kind of consistent hard work, effort, nailing things, learning, adjusting, you can do a heck of a lot. So yeah, that was kind of the background where Revive Stronger came from, and then like a big jump to where it is now.
No, we appreciate it, obviously opening up about your dark times and stuff. I see it with a lot of people, however, who are successful, especially in the fitness world. They always have some sort of obstacle or some sort of dark sort of period that kind of leads them to this obsession. Like I know for myself, it's a similar sort of thing with my injuries in football, and I had to take a time away from it, retirement. And I became obsessed with finding the best things to kind of work rehab wise around my injuries. What can I do to keep on training and manage my injuries? What can I do nutrition wise, sleep wise? Like you get so obsessed in it because you want to try and find the best methods, which I think is what leads people to get to the top level. And when like normal people see, like myself, I do mobility and stuff every single morning. I try and get my steps and all that. So I've got a very regimented routine, and people ask like, why do I do that? How do I get to that point? I can't see myself doing that. It's because I kind of feel like I have to, which is probably like similar to yourself. You probably felt like, right, I've had this obstacle, this thing that's happened in my life. And obviously I enjoy my run, but I need something else to fill that gap. And I want to keep on pushing myself to the limit. So I want to find out every single sort of way or variable that I can get it around. So you do get obsessed with it, which is a great thing. But like you said, there's healthy ways to do it. And there's obviously other ways that you can do it, which is when coaches come perfectly into play, which is probably why yourself obviously led on to becoming a coach so successful with Revive Stronger. And then it's another reason why I've got into coaching, just to help others with not doing the mistakes that I made myself. Which I'm guessing the exact same thing. Where was your sorry, go back to your personal training. Where was your first personal training job, one-to-one, and how did it go to start with? How did you find one-to-one personal training?
So yeah, in regards to bodybuilding, it was because I felt completely out of control of my body. And so I got obsessed, and I'm still obsessed with the fact that I can control like nutrition, like you said, sleep, training. If I control these variables, I get an outcome. Like, and I love that, because this is probably one of my worst traits, is that I get very anxious when I'm out of control. Don't like any scenario where I'm out of control. Definitely a control freak. So yeah, I felt completely out of control of my body and lost all confidence after that accident. So I kind of gave up the running and all of the like cardio and these sort of things. And that's why bodybuilding is just like kind of a safe place for me, where I could really build myself up. But in terms of my, becoming a personal trainer, so I became a PT actually in my home gym. So I was still living at home with my parents at the time, which was lucky to allow me to transition into a lesser paid job. And weirdly enough, I think it was a blessing in disguise in some ways, because I was in prep and I was very ignorant to the process. I didn't realize how tired and grumpy and moody I would get. And so I'd be very happy for clients not to turn up. I'd kind of put off even trying to do like various sales and things like this. And it's hard enough going into being a PT when you're an introvert and not super confident, let alone in prep and not having any energy. So that actually led me to go online, because some of the kind of other kids, I guess, or guys a bit younger than me, saw me getting like shredded, saw me lifting, and they're like, this is new, this is different. He's doing like squats and deadlifts and benching and like these big compound lifts. We're just doing arms. He looks like that. He's losing weight. How's he doing it? So they'd ask me questions, and then I'd be like, why do I program for you? We'll take this online. And so I picked up clients that were like basically guys a few years younger than me from the surrounding schools, started coaching them online. And that's where the online side grew. And so I slowly transitioned out of like being a one-on-one PT and was finding being behind the desk to suit me better because I get to sit down. And also just, I love programming. I love like data collection. And I found that's a better skill set for me than being kind of in a gym and on a gym floor. I didn't enjoy one-on-one PT, but again, I think now it would probably be a bit different story. I think I'd be a lot more confident. I'd have much more like energy and understanding for being a one-on-one PT. And I might like a mix of both, but I was kind of put in a situation where I was never going to succeed as a one-on-one PT, but I wouldn't change it because now I'm super happy with the career I've developed with the online business.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're doing pretty well for yourself, mate. So don't worry about that. Yeah. And it's weird. You say that you were quite introverted when you were younger. How do you think you built up your confidence? Because that's one thing that a lot of people, not just in terms of fitness, but just in general, when you're quite an introverted person, it is hard because it seems as if it's kind of the right thing to be as extroverted. There's a lot of pressure to be kind of, especially with social media, be out there, be confident, be this, that, and the other. When did it kind of change? What helped you kind of become a little bit more confident in yourself?
So I think just experience is the main thing, just time in the game, doing it more and more and more. I even think of it like a really acute scenario is like show day. I think in my previous kind of seasons, show day was always a bit of a like, what should I be doing today? What variables matter? What's going to impact my look? Should I be having like this burger and fries before I get on stage? What's that going to do? Should I have some alcohol? And now I'm like, I know exactly what I'm doing today. I know exactly what variables I need to control. And I see other people like, they're like, oh, I'm going to have like, I don't know, 7 bags of crisps before I get on stage because that really seems to peak my look. And I'm like, man, I'm really like not convinced by this or what have you. Like, I'm just like, that's probably just a way to get loads of sodium in, and you're probably going to drink a bunch, and that's going to boost your fullness and hydration. That's going to give you the vasodilation that you want for stage. So it's things like this, just experience and time in the game of being consistently working and trying to be better. So for me, I actually started a YouTube channel years ago, and I started vlogging years ago because I was inspired by Matt August. So when he was doing his, I started like just doing bits of videos and like a bit of educational content, because that's what I've always liked, just like educational content. I'm not really one of those like lifestyle type of vloggers. I tend to like to help people. That's where I feel comfortable, and that's what I like to do. So I think it was just doing that more and more, becoming confident in myself, who I am. And I still won't say I'm like the most confident person. I'm certainly not an extrovert. I'm still introverted. But when it comes to social media, I don't find it hard at all getting on camera. Don't find it hard at all getting on podcasts. I used to, for my podcast, like get anxious, and I used to get a big sweat on before every single one. And I might do for some guests who maybe I haven't spoken to before. But now I'm pretty calm, pretty laid back. I feel pretty confident about it. Presenting in front of like an audience would be different though, like a live audience, that stresses me out. And again, I think that's because I just don't have a lot of practice doing it. And I am just that type of person. But I think if I was to do it more often, I'd slowly build up the confidence and feel better about it. So yeah, mostly just exposure. Putting yourself in stressful positions, you adapt. Just like in the gym, the same can be said for kind of putting yourself out there as a personal trainer.
I'm exactly the same in terms of podcasts. I get that anxious. It's weird. So like I was speaking to my missus before, saying before the podcast, I'm like, I get so anxious, especially when it's someone who I've like followed for a few years, or I kind of look up to and I follow the stuff. I get anxious. And then when I'm in it, it's like, oh, right, this is all right. This is not too bad. I was lucky enough to speak to Chris Williamson. He's got the Modern Wisdom podcast. There was a talk he done about 2 weeks ago. I spoke to him and I said, like, how do you do it? He's on, I don't know, you're on quite a number of podcasts as well. He's on about 300-400 podcast episodes. And he spoke to like James Clear, Jordan Peterson, like some big names. And I'm like, how do you like control the anxiety and stuff? He's like, mate, before Jordan Peterson, I was trying deep breathing. I was trying this, that, and the other. I tried cold showers. I tried this. And he was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm anxious today. I'm just going to be anxious for this one. And he was like, right, I scripted how I was going to open up. And then after that, it was like, same as script, welcome to the podcast, Jordan Peterson, blah, blah, blah. Then he was just like, right, now I'm in it. So it's kind of nice to hear that there's people like that, like yourself, who still do get anxious, and you admit, and obviously when you started podcasts, when you started doing other things that you do get anxious. It's just putting yourself in them zones, like you said, them kind of things, that areas that are going to be uncomfortable to start with. But the more you do them, they'll get more comfortable and you become more confident in them. And then just like you said with public speaking, that's still going to be something that you're a little bit scared of doing. It could be applying it to different things. So it could be someone who's never been to the gym before. Going to the gym, just walking into the gym for the first time could be that uncomfortable thing that you're going to get really anxious for. But once you do it once, even if you're going for 5 minutes, that's 5 minutes more than you've done yesterday. And then the next time, try and do 10, just build it up. So again, looking at people like yourself, who people look up to, myself looked up to, seeing that you've been in similar sort of mindsets and situations before and getting out of it. Obviously it is a big inspiration. And for anybody listening, can probably take that and kind of put it into their own life. Definitely instead, yeah. So bodybuilding wise, I'll put one of the questions was, what's your why for bodybuilding? I like to ask people, what's the reason why they do stuff? Do you think it was something that you just kind of got obsessed with, or do you think there's a reason? Do you think you could have applied the same thing to like running if that accident didn't happen? Do you think you would have been as obsessed with that sort of sport rather than bodybuilding itself?
I think there probably would have always been something. I have quite an obsessive personality, so I have few interests, but when I go into those interests, I get pretty deep. So bodybuilding is definitely one of the big ones. So I definitely think it would have been some sort of, I love challenging myself physically. So there would have been something that I would have got into. And yeah, running probably would have been, may have well have been the one. And for specifically bodybuilding though, that my why was to build up confidence after the accident, like I said previously, to give me the control. And I fell in love with those. Like if I control these variables, I get these outcomes, and then I can get deep into, and bodybuilding is like no other sport. I was saying to my girlfriend actually, as we were preparing for one of my shows, I was like, if I was doing like a football game, I could just kind of go to the game. I wouldn't have to like measure out my fluids, make sure I've got my salt shaker with me, make sure I've got all my meals laid out. Like I wouldn't need all this extra crap. But bodybuilding is like everything influences your look. And you have to have every variable nailed to a T, which I love. So I love the kind of like all-encompassing nature of bodybuilding and how you have to be on your game every day. And I love the fact that every day I can kind of be progressing towards a goal. If I get to the gym, if I get my sleep, if I hit my nutrition, tick those boxes, I'm a better bodybuilder than I was yesterday. So for me, the biggest why was to kind of prove to myself I was recovered from my accident. And then now it's a case of just bettering myself every day. And I love that. And I love the challenge and the pursuit. And part of my reason why now is as I've become a little bit influential, I guess, within like our niche, I want to be that voice for, or that inspiration for that person who isn't genetically blessed, isn't like winning their first season, second season, but someone who just loves bodybuilding and they love the pursuit and they want to keep going. And that I can be that kind of, I guess, in a way, a bit of a shining star of, if you really persist, if you really are consistent, if you love it, you fall in love with the process, you can exceed your expectations and do well and be competitive in this sport. And you can make it part of your life. And it can be a really positive thing. Because I think a lot of people get into it and they just fall out of love because they're like, oh, like I'm not that great. But you don't truly know your potential until you're a decade deep. Once you're a decade deep, now come to me. A decade deep, doing things seriously, ticking the boxes, the main things every day. I think you'll be surprised how far you can go. So I kind of like being a little bit of a kind of a bit of hope for the natural guy that is just your average dude that wants and loves the sport.
Yeah, the consistency is the key thing there. One of the little quotes that I like to say is, enjoyment leads to consistency, consistency leads to results. If you fall in love with a process or something, you're going to end up like doing it for a long, long time. And if you're consistent, it doesn't have to be, some people think you have to train 7 days a week. Tick off 4 training sessions a week. Obviously still be on track with your nutrition and your diet and your sleep and everything on top of that, but be consistent over so many years and you're going to get somewhere. Like for yourself, you've been training bodybuilding seriously for what, like 8 years plus or whatever it's been now. You've been that consistent with it. You've got to that point. And I remember I've listened to a few podcasts from a few years ago with yourself talking about, I'm not really genetically got the best shape for bodybuilding. Like I don't believe I do, but you've just placed 4th in obviously the British finals. You've got something else coming up and you're only going to get better from there. So if you're saying that, like you said, you just want to work with people who have that passion and have that motivation to actually just keep on doing this, and you never know where things can go. obviously, like you mentioned before, you like the being obsessed and being very regimented and taking all the variables and data and stuff. Does it ever get to a point where it's affected your life balance? Maybe, I don't know, trying to go on holiday, taking a time away from being so obsessed, or maybe if it's influenced relationships with family, girlfriends, friends, anything. Has it ever got to a point where it's been like, right, Steve, I need to kind of give myself a little bit of time away from this regimented lifestyle and balance it?
It definitely used to. When I had less understanding of like flexible dieting, that will, like, when I found flexible dieting and the fact that I could vary from like even just like tuna to chicken or like lean beef, like just opening up those sort of scenarios was a game changer for me. So there was a time where my sisters and my mum were concerned that I had like an eating disorder, because it was like my foods or no foods. I would take Tupperware to family gatherings and I wouldn't eat their food. I would be rude. And yeah, I'm very glad that I got out of that place. And it took me a while to transition and get comfortable, because I found a lot of comfort in my food. Because like I said, my body was completely out of my control. So I knew if I ate what I deemed as like good or productive or what have you, like I was in control. So I still like that element. And I by no means think that I'm perfect now and I have a perfect balance, but I have a balance that I'm comfortable with and that people around me are comfortable with. So I do think like I make decisions, and bodybuilding definitely makes me a little bit less flexible than other people for sure, but I'm happy with that decision. Like I'm okay that that's part of what I want to do. I'm okay that I might ask my mate, if we want to go, I don't know, a week in the lakes, can we drop it during my deload versus dropping it like a couple of weeks sooner? And they're okay with that. If they weren't, then it'll be a case of like, can I be as flexible to do that? Do I want to do that? But yeah, going on holidays and things, I still keep an eye on what I'm doing. I think once you're kind of in the mix of it and you've been doing it for years, it's hard not to. I would say I track to a fault in terms of my nutrition and my precision, in that it's productive, I think, definitely, but I would say to a fault, because I find it hard to switch off in terms of like I always like to think of it like a dimmer switch, where you're either fully on or like you're not fully on or fully off. But I do find it hard to dim it all the way to being a little bit or more off. Like in a scenario where that is a case is maybe like post show. Once I finish all my shows this season, I really want to just switch off and go and enjoy like a Domino's or something. And I find it really hard to do that. I will be like, no, I want to hit my macros for the day. And our post show has never been a challenging period for me, because I've just been back on the money. But part of me would like to dim it a little bit. Part of me would like to be like, no, I can enjoy some free meals. I can just jump on a little bit more body fat. You don't even need to think about all of that. You can just have a couple of days off. It's okay, Steve. But I find it really hard. And I think part of that has led to my success as an individual within my career and also within bodybuilding. But like I said, I think it would be nice if I could pull it back a little bit, if I could be a little bit less obsessive, if I could be a little bit less dialed in. But I don't know if I could successfully do that and be where I am at the same time. So yes, it's very previously it's taken like away from relationships and it's been a burden for family. But now I'm way better at managing everything and keeping things in check. And basically I take it to the point where it's not causing a stress. Like my nutrition, my training and everything, I try and fit it. I try and make it a lifestyle. That's what I try to say. And that's what I try and do for all my clients, kind of put myself in their shoes, try and make it a lifestyle for them, whatever modifications we can make to make it as optimal for their scenario. And that's what I do. And I'm just fortunate I'm in a very like controllable scenario where I work for myself, work from home, so I can make kind of decisions and be quite selfish. But like contest prep, for example, that is at least a few months of that where like I'm not eating out with my girlfriend. We're not kind of, our relationship changes for a period of time. I'm way more focused on like needing to do my steps, even down to like my dog. My relationship with my dog is not in the best place because I go for walks and it's just a functional thing. Like I'm not enjoying that walk with the dog. It's a case of I need to get these steps in. Don't you be sniffing around here. I haven't got the time. Like, let's go. And she's probably like, oh man, he's pulling me all over the place. Whereas previously I could like stop and pause and enjoy that walk a little bit more. So yeah, by no means is it kind of completely balanced. There are times at which it's incredibly unbalanced, like now, but there are times where I can be far more free, and I will take a whole week, like go on holiday, and I want to do that. And next year I want to go like traveling for a period of time and take more time away from. It's hard as a self-employed person as well to take, like, even like taking 2 weeks off scares me. A week I can just about manage, but I'd like to take 2 weeks off, and 2 weeks off like the gym, like, and training. But I don't know if I'm in that point yet.
I'm the same as that. I hear it. I think, you know what, I think in this day and age, there's probably a lot of people who do have this sort of, it is kind of like a mental health issue with actually taking time off, because everyone's pushed, right? Grind, Gary V sort of lifestyle. You've got to be on it all the time. 16-hour days for 7 days a week sort of thing. You've got to be always on it. And when you get used to that sort of regimen, you get so regimented and so stuck in a routine that when you try to back off, you're like, I don't like this. Like, I like my routine. I feel like I'm bored. Like, I can't switch off and do these things. But you forget, like, life isn't about working and being 100%. There's other things out there that you need to see. In bodybuilding's a great example, I think, in terms of building discipline. Obviously, especially when you're on contest prep, it's like 6 months, get your head down. Pretty much, it's going to be pretty much no life balance. You're 100% focused on something. But after that 6 months, I'm going to back off and I'm going to enjoy things, which I think people need to learn about. I'm a big believer in you need to have a good long period of sacrifice if you want to get to a certain level. Like, for people opening up a new gym, you're going to have long days, especially as a PT. It's going to be long days PT, working, setting up gym, setting up your classes and stuff. It's going to be tough. But once you get to a certain point, you might be at a point where you can maybe employ some staff to take a little bit of workload off you. Then you can back off a little bit and enjoy it. But it's just having that balance. And then again, relating it to football, because I've got a few listeners who relate to football. In season, you're going to have to be quite strict with yourself. You might have international break where you have maybe a week off. You can go and enjoy yourself there. And then when the season's finished, you can enjoy yourself there. But just having that life balance, and also every so often put little things in to look forward to. Like, we've got a trip away to Edinburgh at Christmas time. It's something that I'm kind of working towards. So I know if I work really hard up to that point, then I've earned it in my own head, and I can back off and enjoy that long weekend away and not feel as guilty. Another question: what's your relationship with alcohol? Like, do you drink much, or is it something that you dabble in here and there?
So I went through a period of drinking a fair amount from the age of probably 16 to 20. Where I had, or maybe even 15, where I would drink, like, and I had a bad relationship with alcohol. Like, it was a case of, like, I'd binge, and then the next day I'd like purge. I'd go like exercise purging as well, like doing runs to try and burn it off. And I'd drink. Like I said, I'm obsessive, and it would be a case of, if I'm drinking, I'm getting smashed. And that would be my relationship with alcohol. Not that I had a problem or anything. It was just like a very typical kind of teenager, I think. But after my accident, I was on fluid restrictions for like over a year. So there was no alcohol involved during that period of time. It couldn't happen. And so I basically became teetotal after that. I wouldn't say I'm teetotal. If there's like a celebration or I'm at a wedding and there's like a cheers and have some champagne, I'll do it as long as I'm not dieting. Like, I definitely do it. And like, might enjoy like a single cider or something if I felt like I wanted to. But I no longer drink to get drunk. My goals in bodybuilding and getting the best sleep and the best like muscle protein synthesis, all those things are just way more important to do that. Would I like to like maybe even have like once or twice a year where I just fuck it, just like completely just go there? Yeah, I think I'd quite like to do that. And I'd probably try and plan that in a period of time where I'm like in an active recovery phase or something where it really didn't matter. But like I said, I'm kind of perfect to a fault. So yeah. I think I'd find it hard to even do that. So yeah, I don't drink really. If someone was to ask me like, do you drink? I'd be like, nah.
Yeah, I think it's quite as much as it's not a good thing. It's a good thing to get the drinking out of the way when you're younger, especially around that age. Because I've done a podcast with Jack Thorburn as well, and he had a big spell when he was younger where he used to like to drink a lot. And then now I don't think he drinks at all. He's probably teetotal. He's very obsessive again with his routine and stuff. So kind of getting it out when you're younger is sometimes a good thing. But for myself, I was always dead strict. Obviously, I was playing football when I was that age, so I was quite regimented. Like, didn't really drink in season and stuff. And then it kind of got to a point where I was like, got the urge to do it because I've never done it. So that's when it's hard to kind of control it. So if you're young, enjoy yourself. I would probably say that. But if you do want to take the sport seriously, that's when you need to kind of think, right, is this drinking going to affect my goals? What's my priorities here? Is it this bodybuilding show? Is it, I don't know, getting in shape for someone's wedding or a holiday, whatever it is. You just got to prioritize things, but it's fair play. If anybody who goes completely teetotal, I've got massive respect for you, because there's a lot of social pressure as well to actually have to drink in social situations, which I'm a big believer in. Like if you can't have a good time with certain people without alcohol, then have a look about like who you surround yourself with.
Yeah,
100%.
Yeah, I found it hard at first, but I think it was more in my head than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And then people kind of get used to the fact that you don't.
Yeah.
But it does disappoint some people. But like you said, I think you maybe said, like, sometimes look at the people you're hanging out with. If they only want to be with you, if you're willing to get smashed and slaughtered with them, if that's not your interest anymore, find a group of people who are more similar to you. And yeah, I think I've managed to do that.
Yeah, I was going to say, would you say your circle now is a lot of people within the industry? Do you have a circle outside of obviously the fitness industry? I know you do obviously podcasts with some of the big names out there. Would you say your circle's more in the industry or out of it?
I have a couple of select friends who I hang out with, and my best mate is my mate from school from a young age, and he's not in the industry at all. And obviously my girlfriend, she's completely outside the industry, and they're the two people who are closest to me. And then I have a few other kind of friends, but yeah, most of my kind of real friends, like Pascal, for example, my business partner, they're right within the mix of the industry. The other coaches on the team Revive Stronger kind of team, and most people I talk to on a daily basis are in the industry. So yeah, I have mostly a circle of people who I talk with who are industry based, but there are a select number of people outside as well, and I love having them because they keep me kind of a bit more grounded, a little bit less just blinkers on, and bodybuilding is everything. So I appreciate them a lot.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I've got probably a similar mix, having the people outside the industry just to be like, right, Brendan, you're getting a bit obsessive now. This is a bit too much. Because when you're in it and you're seeing everybody being so on it and looking so good on Instagram, and they're in the routines and posting stuff, and you want to be like that. You want to be 100% on it. But again, Instagram's always just a highlights reel. They might be doing bits and bobs that they're not showing. So having people just to hold your back is probably the best thing. A good balance of the two, definitely. So we'll talk a little bit more about bodybuilding, more about the fun stuff now. So in terms of your training, I noticed that you've always kind of trained in just a generic, they say a generic gym, like the gym. Is it the gym group that you normally go to train at majority of the time?
Yeah, I've been in, since I moved into London, I've only had access really to commercial gyms. Mm-hmm. So, and then before that, it was my home gym, which you would consider another kind of commercial gym. And since moved to Vauxhall, we've been here 3 years. It's been the gym, which is just over a 5-minute walk away. But the closest bodybuilding gym is probably in Tooting. It's Yorkies, and that's probably 45 minutes door to door. So it's just, unfortunately, the gym has been my gym for a while.
That just goes to show us a lot, though, because the industry these days, everyone's trying to get quite fancy with things. Obviously, there's benefits to doing things like cuffed exercises, reverse banded exercises and stuff like that. Why? I know obviously you add little bits of it, but why haven't you went down that route specifically? Are you very kind of, I'm very not traditional, but I like the way that I train. I don't feel like I need it. Is there a reason behind that reason that you haven't went down that route? Sorry.
I have tried various things. So I have tried banding various movements. I have tried using cuffs. I own bands and cuffs and things like this. And I do dabble in bits of that kind of more, I guess, ultra biomechanic specific style of setup. I'm not fully convinced that the kind of juice is worth the squeeze in most scenarios. I think in a well-balanced training program with your machines, your cables, your dumbbells, your barbells, the need or necessary, the necessity or need for doing these other things is just not there. I think there are specific scenarios where it can definitely help. So I might suggest someone band a hack squat if they are having trouble at the bottom with knee or lower back pain or something, where you can kind of deload the load at that point. But I think a lot of the time it's just not necessary because I am that person who will try and milk and squeeze everything out of everything. But I just haven't found or seen the true benefit to these. And maybe I haven't tried it sufficiently enough, but I'm very confident and comfortable with kind of the exercises that I've been using and the way that I vary them and program them within a microcycle so that I'm getting kind of the same benefits that maybe these people are trying to get, but through a different means. So yeah, that's mostly why I just haven't gone down that route, because I haven't seen the true benefit.
It's working for you at the minute anyway, what you're doing. You can obviously see you've gained 10 pounds of muscle in the last 4 years, whatever it's been. It's just so easy to get sucked in it, because a lot of the competitors, like obviously AJ, he does a little bit of reverse band and stuff and cuff stuff as well. So looking at people who are in the similar sort of field, they've went down that route as well. So it probably is easy, but if it's working for you, there's no need to overcomplicate things. I think especially for beginners, just ticking off the basic movements and not overcomplicating things. And then down the line, maybe 5-10 years down the line, you can maybe look into it. And like you said, if you're getting injuries and stuff, it's always something to look into, try new things. But for me, it's whatever you enjoy. If you enjoy doing banded exercises, if it obviously touches your ego a little bit when you can stick an extra few plates on with sticking a reverse band on, but whatever you enjoy doing and whatever you can stick to, I'd definitely say is the best way. And it's obviously work for yourself. You mentioned a bit about obviously macrocycles, mesocycles and stuff. How do you structure your training? Well, especially currently in terms of when you're prepping, do you structure it in terms of increasing volume over time, increasing or lowering the RAR, reps in reserve? How do you program your sessions at the minute?
So I like to look at it as like a principled based approach in terms of like the base being specificity. So everything within the program is towards hypertrophy. So muscle growth. I have to look at every exercise, every like rep range, every amount of like total set volume that I'm doing for the week. And I want to be like, I'm doing that because that's ultimately the right answer for hypertrophy. So if there was like a bozo ball squat, it'd be like, is that the best movement for hypertrophy? I don't know. Or if there was like 10 sets of back squats through the week, it's like, is that the best like stimulus to fatigue ratio for hypertrophy? Or could you pick a better movement there? So everything in the program needs to be specifically towards hypertrophy. And then next important is overload. So it needs to be challenging. So I definitely work within an absolute intensity, but absolute intensities in terms of like load on the bar or rep ranges almost doesn't matter for hypertrophy, so long as you get your relative intensity in check. So your proximity to failure, essentially. As long as you're training close enough to failure, pretty much 1 up to like 40 repetitions, I think is within the research of providing a sufficient dose of absolute load for hypertrophy. I don't train as low as 1 rep and I don't train up to 40 reps. I like to be in a bit of a tighter, kind of more productive band than that, an efficient band. So I tend to work within like a 5 to 30 repetition rep range and rarely actually go above like 25 reps. And that'll be exercise specific, kind of phase specific as well, that I use that. And then in terms of overload, so like I said, you want to be in a close enough proximity to failure. So you want to be at least like, you could be maybe as far as some research would indicate being as far as 5 reps in reserve or 5 reps from failure. For me, that's a little bit uncomfortable. It's a bit too far away, a little bit too arbitrary as well. Again, research will show that people aren't great at estimating reps further away from failure, especially at higher repetitions. The more advanced you are, the heavier you're lifting, the closer you are to failure, the better people are gauging this. So I like kicking things off at 3 to 4 reps in reserve at least, and then looking to progress things and training to 0 reps in reserve. You may hit failure on some movements where appropriate as well. So specificity, overload, and then like progressive part of that. So always looking to challenge the body, get an extra repetition here, an extra amount of load where you can, until you need then fatigue management, which is a big core principle as well. So I will use deload periods. So once I get to like a point of which basically you're pushing your body to its absolute limits in terms of the amount of volume it can do, you're completely like, in terms of proximity to failure, you've got no more reps in reserve. Your fatigue is very high, which is leading to potentially a drop in performance, at least a stagnation in performance. So next week, if you tried to come and beat these numbers, you just kind of maybe maintain at best, but more than likely you'd see a detriment in performance because fatigue is so high. So I do use deload periods to then come back into a periodized cycle of making sure we start with a minimum threshold kind of for overload and for hypertrophy. And then from that threshold, make things harder over time and work with an amount of volume that is, again, meeting that threshold for growth, and then built over time and auto-regulated based off your recovery and your capabilities to your limit, deload, come back in and cycle. And then my kind of periodization model would be summarized as whatever's giving you the best stimulus to fatigue ratio at the time. So in terms of like loading parameters, maybe starting off heavier at the start of your mesocycles gives you a really great stimulus to fatigue ratio. So you're getting really good pumps, really good disruption, you're progressing really well, and it's not beating you up a ton. After an amount of time, those heavier weights might start really beating you up. So you might decide, right, I'm going to kind of go to a slightly higher repetition range. Maybe I include a bit of hack squatting alongside my back squatting, or I move the back squat, go to a hack squat, kind of allow me to get a better stimulus to fatigue ratio. So any variation to rep range, to set numbers, to exercises would be kind of auto-regulated best to get the best stimulus to fatigue ratio. And that's how I periodize, is basically to promote the best stimulus to your fatigue, because if you're doing that, it's best bang for your buck. That's the best hypertrophy you're going to get for the fatigue you're producing, because everything has a cost, and you need to balance that through volume. And that's I guess a quick summary of how I like to program. I don't know if that answered the question.
No, definitely. I was going to say that's one of the big things that I've, especially since I first started training to now, want to learn is that one, not every exercise is just like stimulating the same. Every exercise has its kind of fatigue costs. In terms of like a hack squat or barbell back squat is going to be a little bit more taxing than like maybe a leg extension or a hamstring curl or something like that. That's one thing. I just thought like, right, if I'm doing a leg exercise, that's a set kind of amount of fatigue that I'm going to get for that one. Another one is manipulating volume. Like I thought, right, if I stick to, don't know, even like when I was starting out, it was like 20 sets a session, something ridiculously high, which I think we all did, especially on the chest days, adding so much volume in that you just can't recover from it. And you just feel like, right, I need to do that for every single session and I'll be fine. But like you burn out, you don't have enough time to recover. So not starting off like I always get when I get new clients, and I always start them with like literally like 2 sets maybe per exercise, and they're like, oh, is that all we're going to do? But I'll text them the next day saying, actually, my legs are quite sore, like something like, and I'm not used to this kind of thing. But starting off that lower volume and just kind of seeing like how do I feel after the session? Do I have a little bit of soreness? Obviously, soreness isn't always an indication of if you're actually stimulate the muscle. Sometimes could just be not used to that movement. But how do you feel after that? And then if you feel okay, right, maybe we'll start upping the volume or open the rep range or whatever it is, and just manipulating things. So yeah, education is massive, which I think the likes of yourself, obviously 3DMJ, Mike Isrartel, they're some of the big names and big people who I've followed over the last few years who have really put the education, the science-based approach into bodybuilding, and obviously people around are obviously learning as well. So yeah, credit to yourselves for obviously looking into that. How did you end up getting to kind of know, obviously, Mike Isrartel, Eric Helms? How did you get to meet them? Was it through podcasts or was it through just literally just reaching out to them, which is one thing I'm keen to hear about?
So with Mike, it was interesting because I think I had read some of his work. I read the scientific principles of strength training, which kind of blew my mind at the time because it really broke everything down into it kind of cut through the matrix, as it were, of strength training in a way that I'd never seen before. And so me alongside someone else who was in the industry, Mike Samuels, wanted to bring Mike over and James for a seminar. And so we brought him over to the UK for the first time in 2015, I believe. And I met him for the first time in like a sushi. I think it was sushi. It was in like I think it was a sushi restaurant. I was like, I've never had sushi. And I came and sat down. He was just like huge guy, like eating tons of food. And I was like, holy shit. So this was my first kind of time meeting Mike. They did the seminar. After the seminar, there was some questions kind of left from some of the attendees. And I asked, would you be interested hopping on a call, recording it? We would put it out as a podcast. And we did it and we loved it. And we just got off really, we just really enjoyed one another. I think he's quite extroverted and we balance each other really nicely because I'm introverted, but he pulls me out of my shell. And I love Mike. He's an amazing person, great human being, incredibly smart, very humble. And we kicked it off with the podcast. Now he's been over for like 3 seminars. Hopefully we'll have another one at least next year to get him over again. And then after having done that with Mike, it kind of built up a bit of confidence to reach out to other people who I've spoken to online in the industry. And so kind of started reaching out to other people to come on who I'd been to their seminars. So there used to be quite frequently like seminars with Brad Schoenfeld, Eric Helms came over a couple of times. So I'd met them in person, like this shy kid being like, hi, I'm Steve Hall. And then I'd email them being like, so I've got this podcast, would you come on? And they're like, yeah, sure. Like, you're a good guy. Like, let's do this. So then I started getting them on. And since like growing the confidence to bring people on the podcast. I just like to reach out to people, and anyone who I think has a great message or kind of is evidence-based and has really good knowledge that I want to share on the podcast, so I'll bring them on so long as I follow them. I've made the mistake enough times, not too many times, but sometimes, where I'll bring guests on who I don't really know very well. And I regret bringing people on like that, because it doesn't give them justice, and also the audience and myself, it's not as good a conversation. So it's definitely just people I know in the industry, potentially met them, or we've just talked. Like Menno, I've never met in real life, but we've spoken a lot on the podcast.
Yeah. So you had John Dewar on not too long ago as well, who's a big name. And he was like, yeah, I've been following your podcast for years. And like, I can imagine what that's like for yourself, thinking like, bloody hell, like someone like that's obviously been following me. It's a lot of respect to yourself for what you've built, but it's kind of like that, like kid meets his hero and you're like, well, you know who I am sort of thing. It's kind of weird, but yeah, it just goes to show that just reaching out to someone, that's something that like I've been kind of forcing myself to, because it's quite like, it's nerve wracking when you're messaging, you're like, kind of hoping in your head, like, I hope they don't reply, because it's going to be a big kind of one of them things that you get nervous for. But when they reply, it's like, right, I need to kind of get my shit together here and put it together. But yeah, just reaching out to people is so important. And I think in the fitness industry, there's a lot of good people out there who will like literally have messaged a few people and be like, yeah, I'll come on the podcast, like yourself. Like, didn't really have to exactly try too hard or anything like that. It's not like trying to get a girl on Instagram or something like that. No. It's not like that. Not like I would know what that is. But it's just reaching out to good people in the industry, and they will obviously, if they want to help out people, because you've been in the same situation as like myself, trying to grow a business and a podcast. So no, I appreciate you coming on today. Yeah,
for sure.
It's fun. So in terms of last question before we jump into the 3 questions at the end, did you have a look at the 3 questions, by the way?
I actually like hitting questions fresh. So I quickly looked over things, but I didn't really, so I can't remember them, but I know there's some quick fire ones. I like hitting them fresh for some reason. I just feel I get a bit like, I
like the pressure.
Yeah, I overthink it otherwise.
I think James Smith says something like that. Like when he's at a restaurant, he doesn't actually look at the menu until the waitress asks him what he wants. He just likes that sudden rush of like, right, what do I need?
I'm the opposite to that. I look at the menu before I get to the restaurant.
I've already planned my Nando's order for tonight, so I'm going to Nando's later on. So I've planned it already. Got it in my MyFitnessPal. But yeah, in terms of your coaching business, when did it really start to kick off? Like really take off for you?
That's a good question. I would probably say it was in conjunction with doing the podcast with Mike. I would probably have to say that, because I think the podcast really helped us grow. I think we helped Mike grow, or I helped Mike grow at that time, and he helped me grow. I think that probably was like, because it was information people hadn't really heard packaged in that way before. I think now a lot of Mike's concepts are very well known to people, but at that time it was kind of news. And so I think that maybe was when things really got going, to be honest. Apart from that, probably the step before that, when I moved out of home and moved in with my girlfriend, and I was barely making enough to afford the rent, was I would be writing and I'd get noticed in the personal training development center. They'd pick out my articles as like articles of the week. And quite regularly I'd be on there, like every couple of weeks, they'd be picking out one of my articles, which was awesome. So I actually started out in written format before I started podcasting or any of the videos. So I think those 2 things were things that really helped the business grow.
Mm-hmm. No, perfect. It is interesting. I just find it interesting how people kind of take off. So it's just putting good content. I think anybody who puts good content out, it might take a little bit longer, especially these days with that saturated the market, especially like growing a podcast, YouTube, Instagram, everyone's trying to do it. But in time, as long as you're obviously trying to reach out and interact with people within the fitness industry who are maybe got a little bit more of a following, which will help you, it'll come eventually if you're putting the right knowledge out. And people know the ones who aren't and who are. And one quick final question as well, which is a bit of a cheeky one. Obviously, you're natural bodybuilder. The big question is, have you ever been tempted by going down the assisted route, taking steroids and all the performance enhancing drugs? It probably is very, very appealing to go down that route. Have you ever been tempted yourself?
Only as far as just, it sounds cool. That's about as far as I've ever got. And I've spoke to someone on a podcast, like, why have you chosen to stay natural? And I think a big part of it is just ease of like accessibility. I have no one close to me who's enhanced. I have no idea the first step to get hold of this stuff. Like I just, it's not like I can go to the supermarket, like, why have you never eaten venison or something? Well, it's not at my supermarket. It's like, I don't even know where to begin. I don't know who to talk to. I don't know how any of this stuff works. So for me, it's just nothing I even ever think about. So the temptation is actually almost non-existent because I don't even think about it as an option. So yeah, no, if I had a mate who, like, I don't know, if I lived, say, like, I don't know, neighbors with Mike and like with Jared and Charlie, and we trained together, I have no doubt I would have thought about it heavily. I may have even gone down that route, who knows? But because I'm not in that vicinity and I don't have like a mate or someone close to me who's doing it, like I'm close to them, but not in proximity. So, and I don't talk about that stuff. It's all just the kind of stuff we're talking about. So I just, complete ignorance. So no, I've never, apart from being like, that would be cool, I just don't even, like, I've not taken a step to like learning about it or how do I get hold of it, anything like that.
Yeah, you've also built like a name in the natural bodybuilding fitness community. You would kind of like lose that as well. I don't know if not people would lose respect for you, but you would kind of lose that kind of like target, if you know what I mean, which is another thing. But yeah, I'm the same. I've never been to that. I quite like the fact of see what we can actually, what level can we actually get to and how much can I push myself. I don't see it as cheating. Like, I have massive respect for anybody who goes down that route, and it's a lot of obviously health risks. So there's massive respect to anybody who does it properly as well, obviously in the right ways. But I've never been tempted myself either. It's just staying natural and seeing what I can do, obviously unassisted as well. So we'll jump into the final 3 questions. So first one, 3 people that you would like to invite round for dinner or go out for a coffee with or have round for coffee.
Oh God, this is an interesting one. So I think probably, I don't know why this person comes up with everyone, but he's just been doing some bits with Vanity Fair and it's been like awesome, like The Rock. So Dwayne The Rock Johnson, he just is a really cool guy. I'm going to say Mike Isrartel just because I don't get to hang out with him enough. And I'm going to say Eric Helms because I've never had a really good chunk of time one-on-one with Eric, and Mike are great together. And then I think they'd appreciate having The Rock there. Yeah,
it could be interesting talking about training because The Rock's training volume is probably a double what everyone else.
Yeah, we talk about cheat meals and The Rock's training volume and his abs.
Yeah, no, it'd be ridiculous. That'd be a good conversation. Next one, 3 people you'd want to train with.
So I'd love to try training with who? Maybe Dorian Yates. I think would be pretty cool to just get an idea of like how did he really train, and do some bits and pieces with him. Jay Cutler, I think, would also be someone who I think had a really cool training philosophy and is still in prime shape and had a great physique. And then I'm going to say Brett Freeman. He's a natural bodybuilder, a really good friend, and I would just love to just train with him and have a good time.
Yeah, that'd be class. That'd be decent. And then last question, one thing you would say to yourself 5 years ago.
Maybe keep going, keep working, keep doing what you're doing, be more confident in yourself, and don't give yourself such a hard time.
No, I love that. Nice little message. Do you want to quickly shout out your Instagram, podcast, YouTube, just where people can obviously find yourself?
Cool. Yeah. Thank you again for the chat. Thanks for having me on. So revivestronger.com is our website. So you'll be able to find our coaching, our member site, podcast, everything over there. So if people are interested in that, go there. If you want to see more from me, probably Revive Stronger on Instagram is the best place. Team Revive Stronger has all of our coaches as well. And you can get some more kind of information over there. And then the Revive Stronger podcast, YouTube, or over on any kind of podcast provider, you'll be able to find the podcast on as well. So yeah, that's probably the main pieces.
Perfect. I'll put all the links in the description and the show notes down below as well. But Steve, thank you very much again for coming on, especially like I said, when you're in prep mode at the minute. Time's valuable at the minute, so we appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Cheers.
Cheers, man. Thank you.